Hello guys, and welcome to a new WARNO video today by me, Vulcan. Today I have for you the first ever battle group preview for WARNO, and I'm very excited to bring this to you guys. We're going to be jumping into the armory, and we're going to be taking a look at the 3rd Armoured, which is the division which I played in the first gameplay video, so if you missed that, make sure to go check it out. Please remember though that this is an early access build, and of course everything you're about to see here is subject to change. I'll probably cover them again once the game is fully released, but for now I just wanted to show off the units and all of the models and all that good stuff, all of the statistics and stuff of these different units, and my deck as well, which I'll leave linked in the description. I believe there'll be a deck code and you guys can use that as soon as you get any access to the early access. So there you go. Alright, so let's get into it. Starting off with the M35 supply. This is an unarmoured supply truck with 800 supply. It has 108 km/h on-road speed, which means it can get to the front line relatively fast. But the trouble with this is, of course, its lack of supply compared to other units. So not the best option by any means. Then there's the M113A2 supply, which is the same supply capacity, but with a little bit of armour, as you can see. It has a on-road speed that's slower than the M35 supply. The speed is 54 km/h off-road, which is actually the same as an M35 as well, so it doesn't even benefit from having the tracks. The Hempt is easily your best ground supply choice. It has the 108 km/h on-road speed, which makes it very fast, and also the 90 km/h off-road speed. What a fast boy. It also has the armour and 2,500 supply, so it's pretty fantastic. It does of course cost a lot more, so in some situations, you know, it would suck to lose one of these, but for the most part you're gonna get more out of it than you would some of these other supply vehicles. I guess the benefit of having these other supply vehicles is you can split them up to multiple areas, and something like an M35 supply or an M113A2 supply would be good for just kind of reloading infantry AT weapons, for example, like the odd HGM or rockets or whatever. Anyway, moving on, we have the M151 MUT CP. This is an unarmoured jeep used for capturing sectors. You can use it to support your units and give them veterancy, but I wouldn't recommend it because it will die very, very quickly. Then there's the M577 CPC, which is an all-round better option in my opinion than the MUT because it has armour, which makes it more resilient to stray artillery and bombing strikes, and this is what you're kind of going to use to capture your back sectors quite a lot, the ones that aren't going to be contested. Then there is the UH60A supply, which I have in my deck here. This is an unarmoured helicopter, but it comes with 2,000 supply and 248 km/h speed. So this is just great for getting supply to where you need it fast, but I wouldn't recommend necessarily throwing it to the front line because it will get shot down because helicopters are quite easy to spot. So what you probably want to do is just land it slightly behind your front line and then drive stuff back to resupply at it or repair or whatever. So that's what I would recommend these for. Then there is the UH60A command helicopter. Again, just good for back capping. Maybe good for sniping enemy spawns. So if you say heli rush or you manage to get an aircraft to like bomb the enemy command at their spawn, then you could fly one of these around the edge of the map and cap it and then spawn stuff in at their end. That's probably what you could use these for. They're also useful for capturing sectors on maps where there are like midway sectors that you can spawn in from. So instead of like spawning all units at the start, you just like send one of these helicopters to go land at a spawn that's further up in the map, and then you bring in your units there instead. But yeah, just some ideas there for using that helicopter. But don't heli rush. It's sad. Anyway, moving on. We have the military police. The infantry models in WARNO are so much better than they were in Steel Division 2. So here we have the military police. They are a 5-man squad with the M16s and an M60. just decent cheap units for dotting around to prevent flanks pretty much, or at least spot flanks before they die. That's what they would be useful for. But the better choice is in fact the military police M67, which has a recoilless. They have 5 M16 and the recoilless rifle, and the recoilless is fantastic because it can actually destroy enemy armored targets at range. It's got 1,415 meter range on its recoilless, which means it can definitely hit at a long distance, as opposed to, you know, the laws of, say, a mechanized rifle. Sorry, not the mechanized rifle, the airborne rifles, which only has 530 meter range, for example. Of course, these numbers are subject to change, of course. It is an early access build, remember. But for now, the military police with the recoilless are pretty damn good for side-shotting and just like popping units on roads if you want to like defend a particular area. So I definitely recommend taking the card of the military police. Their transport is the MUT, same as the other military police. It's just a jeep with a machine gun on it. I would recommend selling it once you bring them in. Next up is the engineer leader. Now, having an infantry leader unit is probably a good idea just because you can hide them in buildings. So for certain sectors where there are a lot of buildings, it would make it a lot easier to keep your leader alive. Also, in those situations, you can use it to support your other infantry to give them extra veterancy. So yeah, that is definitely something that you can do with the engineer leader. They just come in with the M35. By the way, if you're in the armory and you want to look at your transports, just make sure to click like the second part, but you have to add them to the deck first before you can look at them at the moment. Anyway, moving on, there's engineers. Now it's funny, the engineers in this, they have satchel charges. Now this is something that's kind of like carried over from Steel Division 2. There were never any satchel charges or the like in Wargame, but in Steel Division 2 they added like throwable explosion packs pretty much, and that's basically what these engineers have. It's a satchel charge, and at close ranges, particularly in towns where you're next to an enemy unit in like a building, or in like a forest, you bump into them at close range, you can use that to great effect, and it does a lot of damage. So that's what you'd be using these for, but in this game, there's not actually many times where you do bump into other units that close up. So there you go. Moving on, we have the engineers with the flash incendiary rocket launcher. The engineers, by the way, can be brought in M113s. These can actually be brought in the M113A1. The engineer flash, I believe, can also be brought in with the M113A1, and I do have that selected here. But yeah, anyway, the flash incendiary rocket launcher is sort of like a short-range anti-infantry rocket launcher that does like a decent amount of damage and leaves napalm on the floor, which forces an enemy unit to move, which means they lose their entrenchment bonus, and therefore you do more damage. I'm not sure if like the entrenchment bonus is like actually a thing in WARNO yet, but I assume it is. And if that's the case, that's what these are good for, and that's why I have them. So yeah, they will definitely help you out, especially in winning like close range infantry engagements, particularly around towns and in forests. So the M113A1, it is an armored APC. It actually has 3 front, 3 side, 1 rear and 1 top armor, which makes it quite a tanky boy, with its 50 cal machine gun to back you up as well. Machine guns in this game don't do a ton of damage or like suppression, because suppression mechanics are different in this game as opposed to Steel Division. It's more reminiscent to Wargame in that regard. But either way, you know, a decent enough speed to get to the front line. And then there's the engineers with the Dragon. These can also come in with the M113A1. You can use these for sniping at range. They are pretty much an AHGM squad with 10 men. They're quite a chunky AHGM squad. And they can do a lot of damage to advancing infantry if they are dug in buildings and heavy cover, and then like reveal themselves with the M16s firing all at once, and they can do a lot of damage. But the Dragon 2 is what it's all about here, just putting them in places where they can find nice side shots, or just face off against enemy sort of light armor, pretty much. They're not going to do too much against heavy tanks, particularly in the front armor, so do bear that in mind. Now when it comes to leadership and stuff, by the way, I reckon all of these numbers are subject to change, so I haven't really talked about them much, and availability and all that good stuff. But for the most part, I'd recommend bringing in stuff at 2 vet if you're gonna. So yeah, that just allows you to use command units to make them 3 vet while you're on the battlefield. All right, next up, the fire team with the law. So this is just a infantry squad that has 2 machine guns instead of like just 1, and then also has the M72 law, which is a 530 meter range, 13 penetration rocket with a decent rate of fire. It's okay, but the main reason I'm bringing these is for the M2A2 Bradley IFV, which is a great infantry fighting vehicle. It comes with the 3 front, side, and then 1 rear and 1 top armor. It has the auto cannon, which is good for chipping away at infantry squads and can do a little bit of damage to armor, but isn't terribly effective. The TOW 2 is, though, and has 2,650 meter range, and you can use these to get some serious damage done because they have 87% accuracy with 2-star vet. So, very, very good weapon system to make use of at range, and that's what I do with the M2A2 Bradley IFV. So there's your fire team law anyway, and then there's the fire team dragon. The fire team dragon is pretty much similar to the engineer's dragon, just has a machine gun. So that's the difference there, and they have slightly less men as well. These can also be brought in with the M2A2 Bradley. Like the fire teams can only be brought in with the Bradleys, and yeah, that's pretty much why you bring them. Then I have the card of the airborne rifles. These guys are just good because they come in with a Black Hawk, which allows you to put them sort of like midway up the map and start to like harass enemy forces early and take ground early along like all of the sort of strategic roads and so on. They have like a really good loadout for engaging infantry at range, and then they have the law for if any vehicles get close. But do bear in mind that when infantry advances onto you, you're going to be revealed at 885 meter range. So tanks will often see your units, and vehicles will often see your units before they get in range of the anti-tank rocket. So often you'll want to use these on return fire if you want to get the armored kills. So bear that in mind. They can only come in the Black Hawk. Alright, next up we have the Mechanized Rifle Leader. These once again can come in the M113A1 and also the M35. Just another leader variant. I have the Engineer Leader just because they're cheap, pretty much. Cheap infantry. They only have like the 5 rifles there, but the Mechanized Rifles are a bit stronger. They have the 8 rifles with the 1 machine gun and the law. So a much more beefy infantry command unit if you want them. Finally, the mechanized rifles, and again these guys can come in the M113A1 and the M35s, but these are pretty much your top tier infantry for the 3rd Armoured Division. They have 8 M16s, 3 of the M249s machine guns, and then the Dragon 2 ATGM there. So pretty much a jack of all trades, but they do cost a lot. They're 70 points, as you can see. They're 11 strength though, which is very nice, which I believe is the highest out of all of the infantry squads that you can get. So yeah, beefy squad with a lot of weapons and decent weapons as well. So yeah, make good use of these. Right, next up, the artillery tab. Not much to go on in the artillery tab since this is an armoured division, but basically you have access to the M106A2 mortars. Mortars are really good at an armoured division to provide smoke for your tanks, but it's not so important in WARNO as it was in Wargame because tanks have their own smoke in a lot of cases. Not all tanks have smoke these days though, so you do have to bear that in mind. There isn't any indication if a unit has smoke or not yet in the armory. I'm probably sure they'll add that later on, but for now it's more just like learning the units that do and don't as you go. But in my artillery tab, I just have the MRS cluster and the M109, but the M109A2, this can also provide smoke. But it's more used as long range, like counter battery is what I would think it would be very good for. Also great for sniping light armored units, support units like AA, or maybe just transports that are sitting around the place, or supply and that lot. They're not going to do a terrible amount of damage to armored targets, but yeah, they're for the light targets, and if you can pin down infantry as well, they're going to do a lot of damage to those. Then there's the MRS cluster. This is just like your standard cluster rocket. It fires like 12 rounds of 6 penetration cluster rockets, and 6 penetration might look low, but most units only have like 1 top armor, so you're going to be doing 5 damage per hit, or whatever damage this is, the 0.24 damage. I'm not entirely sure how WARNO's damage system completely works just yet, but either way, good for counter battery, good for hitting like heavily armored targets that are kind of sat still doing nothing. So yeah, there you go. And then there's the MRS with the standard HE rockets, 227mm rockets, gets 12 per volley again, and just does HE damage, so it won't really affect armored targets that much, but will do a lot of damage to unarmored targets. Let's move on to the tank tab. So in the tank tab, we start off with the M728 CEV. This is a great infantry support tank because it comes with the 165mm main gun that does the 2.47 damage there. So it really does chunk enemy infantry and has the couple machine guns to help it out as well. Has 13 front armor, so can tank sort of like the lighter AT options, but against anything heavy it's just going to get popped. So do bear in mind that it's not like the strongest tank in the world, but it's great as a support weapon. Then in the tank tab, we also currently have AT, or like HGM units. So here we have the M109 ITV, which uses ITO. It has 20 penetration at 2,650 meter range. Bear in mind that tanks have 2,297 meter range on the best of tanks. The HGMs do outrange them, so you can plink away at tanks at range, but the ideal use of these sort of ITO missiles is to get like side shots. That's what you're looking for. You can also just one-shot lighter armored targets, you know, with like 2 front armor or 3 front armor. So that's what they're used for. The M90 1A1 ITV is 25 penetration, so it's just pretty much paying for more penetration. The hull is exactly the same. Accuracy goes up slightly there, as you can see. So yeah, you've still got the 63 km/h speed and the 97 km/h on-road speed there. That's the other thing actually about the CEV. It is a little bit slow, so do bear that in mind. Anyway, moving on to the M1A1 Abrams CP. So just like some of the other tabs, you do have a leader in this tab, and it's just great for supporting your other M1A1s. Although the availability on these is pretty low. You only get 1 per card, and they cost 325 each. So you are kind of paying quite a lot to get the leadership benefits for your other tanks. But in a lot of cases it's kind of worth it, especially for engaging units in offensive sectors. So in sectors where you're contesting, having an armored unit like this that's quite strong with command capability is very nice. So 17 front armor, 7 side armor, just don't get it side shot. But it has 19 penetration on its main gun with 81% accuracy. That is bringing it in at 2 vet, which is the only veterancy you can choose for the vehicle. Anyway, moving on to the M1A1, it's pretty much exactly the same. It's just that it doesn't have the command capabilities, as you can see. But otherwise, at veteran, it's equal in all ways. And a lot cheaper. Then you have the M1A1 HA Abrams, which has more penetration on its main gun, and that's about it. Yeah, that's pretty much the only difference. Oh, also, of course, the armor. Yeah, never mind. The armor is, of course, a lot better as well. 20 front armor, I believe, is like pretty much the max you can get at the moment. So it's a very, 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 very tanky boy. Moving on to the scouts. So this is your recon. You can see the different types of recon. There is good, very good, and then exceptional, I believe, which is the Kiowa. So yeah, there we go, exceptional. So I'm looking down here on the bottom right. The scouts are just your best option for like infantry recon because they are your only option for infantry recon, and they can be brought in with a bunch of different transports. The M113, sorry, A1 or A3, the M15182 Mutt or the Black Hawk. So you can get them into pretty decent positions very fast if you brought them in the Black Hawk, but it would cost you a lot more to do so because the Black Hawk itself costs 75 points. You do need to make sure that you pay attention to the points cost of your transports when making your decks. So yeah, there's your scouts, pretty standard recon squad. Keep them on return fire so they don't reveal themselves. Then there is the M13A3 ACAV, which is an interesting vehicle. It does have the recoilless launcher on it with 10 rounds actually, which is more than the military police. So I could see in some cases this being useful to protect your flanks against enemy sort of light vehicles. But yeah, I haven't really had much chance to try them out. With the recoilless, I've been quite impressed with its capability, so maybe it'd be worth a go, especially with the 20 round per minute rate of fire. Then there's the M150 with the tow on it. It's not even an ITOW, by the way, so it only has 50% accuracy. And pretty much everything else is like worse really than the ACAV. So this is on like a standard M113 hull. So it only has one front, side, rear, top armor, as opposed to the M113A3 ACAV, which has 3 front armor and 3 side armor. So there's also that to bear in mind. Wouldn't take that unit at all, but it looks cool, that's for sure. Then we have the first of the helicopters. This is the OH58 Scout. It has a minigun on it, which is really cool. Its optics are very good, useful for tearing down infantry squads and maybe unarmored vehicles, but other than that, you probably just want to like rely on it for its recon capability, which is very good. It does have the 198 km/h speed, which isn't terribly fast, and it does go down pretty fast. It's only got like 5 health, so it only takes like 1 rocket, I think, to shoot it down, pretty much. Then you have the M3A1 Bradley CFV. This has a TOW-2 missile system on it, so if you bring it in with a bit of extra veterancy, you're going to be getting some decent accuracy out of that. So I'm bringing them in at 2-star vet, which gives them 87% accuracy on the TOW-2, and since they're providing their own very good recon, they can spot the targets for themselves and get those HGMs off at long range. So yeah, decent armored fighting vehicle with the 3 front and 3 side armor, reasonable speed, and that's, yeah, the TOW-2 again is what you use it for. Then finally we have the Kiowa. Now this Kiowa, or Kiowa, I think it's supposed to be said like. I've already had pronunciation issues with my units, and we're already on the English speaking units. But yeah, Kiowa. This has 4 Hellfire missiles, and these have 26 penetration. Very, very good missiles with 2,825 meter range, which is very long, with the 87% accuracy as well, and exceptional optics. So these things are pretty beastly, but you do pay for it. 175 points per helicopter, and also availability is quite low. So you have to bring them in at least 2 vet, and then you only get like 1 of them. If you bring them in at 3 vet, by the way, you can see they go up to 105% accuracy on their Hellfire. Never miss. I don't know how exactly HGMs work, but maybe it's just my luck, but I tend to miss them a lot. Anyway, Stingers. Stinger C squads. So, for anyone familiar with Wargame, these used to be in the infantry tab, and now they are in the AA tab with your other AA units. So they have an infrared SAM missile, which only has 2,295 meter range. It's kind of depressing, but it is a unit that you're going to want to kind of dot around to prevent enemy flanking. Also, they will pop shots at aircraft if they fly over the top of them, so it's also useful for that as well. But yeah, rate of fire is very low, so do bear that in mind. They're just kind of like a AA support unit that needs to be there in support of other AA units, because AA is generally just weak right now in this current build. But of course, everything's subject to change. Moving on, we have the Chaparral. This has 4 surface-to-air missiles. The MIMS there with the 2,825 meter range, 56% accuracy. Does have a little bit of armor on the front and side. The rear is none. So if a bomb lands behind it, it will do quite a lot of damage, but top armor is fine. Yeah, pretty standard AA. Just make sure you have supply with it, because once it's used up its 4 missiles, which it will very quickly, you need to completely reload the unit or it's ineffective. So yeah, just make sure you keep it reloaded. Speed's fine there, as you can see. Then we have the PVADs. The PVADs is, 1 armor all around. It has the Vulcan minigun. It is radar. That's something to point out. Also, if you are in the armory, I haven't actually mentioned this yet, do make sure to hover over these icons. They do give you information about like the way that the weapon systems work. So like, for example, this is saying that this can fire on the move, and it's fire and forget. If we go back to like the Kiowa here, this is semi-active, so it means that you kind of need to be faced in the direction at all time, but you can fire on the move. And if you lose line of sight of the enemy unit, it will lose its tracking, pretty much. So yeah, bear that in mind. You want to check those out for yourself, that's for sure. So yeah, the Chaparral here does have fire and forget missiles, which is really nice. But the PVADs, it needs radar and direct line of sight to fire, of course. A 2,825 meter range against aircraft, which is the same as a Chaparral. Does sort of like damage over time as opposed to all at once, and does affect cohesion probably a lot more than a Chaparral does, because it hits more often. So there you go. Then there's the OH58C-S, which has the air-to-air stingers. These have 3,535 meter range against aircraft, 2,120 meter range against helicopters. The helicopter range there is actually pretty short, but you're not really going to be contested much at the moment for air-to-air engagements with helicopters. So yeah, it's useful for kind of like protecting yourself against enemy helicopters that are trying to flank you. That's what it's there for. We're moving on to the helicopter tab. We're moving on to the awesome AH1F Cobra. I really do like the look of the American helicopters. They're very, very cool. So yeah, here's the Cobra. It comes with a 20mm autocannon and the 28 Hydra rockets. The rockets are useful for dealing damage to lightly armored vehicles and also infantry, of course. 252 km/h speed, and yeah, just a nice support helicopter there, which is pretty cheap, 60 points. But then you have the more expensive variant, the one with the HGEMs, 140 points. It has the Ito missiles, does have the autocannon, the 20mm autocannon, and the 14 Hydra rockets, which are, I believe, are bigger. Oh no, they're the same size. It just looks like they're bigger. So smaller rocket pods, but they also, yeah, get the Ito, and the Ito is good for just like side-shotting stuff. So that's what the AH1F Cobra is great for. The standard Ito doesn't do much damage in the front armor to tanks and heavy armor targets because its penetration is so low. So bear that in mind. It does need manual guidance, so you need to basically be able to see it at all time, and you can't fire on the move. So yeah, it needs to be stationary. Then we have the AH64A Apache, and of course the Apache looks freaking awesome. It comes with multiple rockets. This one has, what was that, 76 rockets. And yeah, great again for demolishing lightly armored targets and infantry. And the 2,120 meter range there, 1,590 meter range against ground targets with its 30mm. Also, that 30mm does do a decent chunk of damage to enemy helicopters, so it does have the helicopter capability there to shoot down others. Then we have the more expensive variant. That one's only 80 points, by the way. This one is 245. It comes with 8 Hellfires. It loses, a set of those rocket pods, as you can see there. So it's only got 38 Hydras, but with the 8 Hellfires are really nice. I do like this variant of the Apache just because it has the ability to attack light armored targets quite well, but also obviously do the extra damage with the high penetration and the range against heavier targets. But with all these helicopters, they are very light on availability, particularly the Apaches. The Apaches, you can only get one of them per card, which is not a lot at all. Whereas the AH1Fs, you can actually get multiple per card based on the amount of veterans you take. So it's like you can get 3 of these on one card at 2 vet, for example. Finally, there is the 405 point AH64A Apache with the 16 Hellfires. That's a lot of cost for those Hellfires, that's for sure. But you're not going to run out, that's for sure. But you're probably better off just going with like 2 sets of these, so you don't have to pay that extra price and then just reload these with supply, pretty much. Finally, Air Tab. So the aircraft in this look beautiful. I mean, all of the units in this game just look awesome. Like the textures and the models just are so top notch. They really are. But this is an F4E Phantom II with bombs. It has the 4 227 kilogram bombs. It also has the Vulcan minigun or Gatling gun, of course, and then the air-to-air missiles there, the AIM-9Js. So basically a light bomber, pretty much. It does have 20% ECM. For those of you who've played Steel Division but not played Wargame, ECM basically reduces the chance of enemy missiles hitting you by a certain percentage. So in this case, the ECM is 20%. The agility is there, it's exceptional, so these are pretty good, but I don't know how accurate the agility really is going to be, because they move so fast that they kind of overwrite that exceptional agility. Like the Thunderbot, for example, has exceptional agility, but it's really slow, so it kind of turns really fast, whereas a Phantom 2 doesn't, because it's moving so fast. But either way, that's the HE variant. There is also a cluster variant, which comes with the rock eyes. This has penetration into the top armor and does plenty of damage there, so an interesting cluster variant. Then we have the napalm variant, which is good for displacing enemy units out of buildings and trees. Doesn't really do a ton of damage at the moment, I don't think, but yeah, it will force the enemy to move, at least. That's the main thing it's there for. Then there is the F111E, the good old aardvarks. They have 227 kilogram bombs, 12 of them in this case, and they're not particularly strong at the moment. Bombs are a little bit ineffective. And then you have the rock eyes, which are the cluster variants, and then you have again napalm variants for these as well. So same plane, just different payloads, and I'd recommend just trying them out if you're gonna. Then there is an A10 with bombs, 227 kilogram bombs. It also has 2 air-to-air missiles, which are generally good for taking down helicopters. Like the A10 is actually really good for taking down helicopters because it is so slow. Whereas like a Phantom 2, when it passes by a helicopter, it will be moving so fast it only gets one of its AIM-9s off. Whereas an A10 will be able to get off probably both and also spray them down with the 30mm as you go. So this is just a great support A10 for taking out enemy helicopters and also bombing light targets and strafing light targets on the ground. But then there's the Thunderbolt 2, which of course comes with the AGM-65B Maverick missiles, which have quite a lot of penetration against ground targets, with a decent range. So 3,180 meter range, they're great for taking out those heavier targets, whilst also having the capability to engage aircraft and helicopters. So these also have armor. That's something to bear in mind. Like the Phantom II and the F111E don't have any armor, but Thunderbolts do, which allows them to mitigate some of the damage that they take from AA, so they can kind of float around a bit longer and release all of their payload. The fuel and stuff isn't really too much to worry about. The other thing is only like, of course, health and then ECM. And ECM on like a Thunderbolt 2 is 20, same with the A10A, and then the F111E actually gets 30%. Then there is the Phantom 2 like air superiority version, which comes with the 2 infrared AIM-9s, but also the 5 Sparrows. Sparrows have 7,775 meter range against enemy aircraft, and they do 6 damage, which means you have to hit 2 of them in order to shoot down an enemy aircraft. But they do come in like 2 vets, so they get a decent amount of accuracy, and yeah, really nice air superiority fighter at the moment. They'll probably get outclassed as we introduce, or as like Eugen introduces more aircraft into the game. But yeah, for now, pretty decent. And then you have the Wild Weasel. Now these are useful for taking out enemy radar AA. And that's specifically what they're for. They have an anti-radiation missile that takes out enemy radar AA. I think they can attack them even if they can't see them, so there you go. And it got 4,240 meter range against those targets, with also 40% ECM, so very, very nice indeed. Alright, and there you go. That's all of the units, and of course I'm just going to quickly click through my tab here so you guys can see what I have selected. And I'll make sure to leave a link to the deck code in the description, because I believe you can do that. Don't forget you can also add combat groups, which you can make up of like groups of the units you've selected in your deck. So if you want to be able to like one-click bring in multiple units, that's one way to do it. But there you go. That is the look at the 3rd Armoured Division, my first battle group preview. Of course, a lot is subject to change, don't forget. But that is it for now. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.